Regular meeting of August 18th of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Titusville is now called to order. Let us stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Chairman Severs.
Present.
Vice Chairman Spidell.
Present.
Secretary Richardson.
Present.
Member Grant.
Present.
Member Rice.
Here.
Member Aton. Member Porter.
Here.
Alternate Member Riley. Alternate Member Childs.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so we can go ahead and proceed with our meeting. Assistant City Attorney, would you like to indicate the notice requirements of the meeting?
Yes, sir. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of August 4th. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes? Not seeing any. Do we have a motion to approve? Member Richardson.
I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting of August the 4th.
We have a second. Member Spidell.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed, no. Okay, the minutes are approved. There are no quasi-judicial matters on the agenda. Member Richardson.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we amend the agenda, and I add item, it's old business, but add an item under new business B, and that's a discussion of the council meeting last week and a discussion regarding the tree protection ordinance.
Okay. Do we have any objections to that? Okay. You certainly could bring it up on your report as well, but I have no problem placing it at that point. So we'll proceed with that accordingly. There's no old business items. New business comprehensive plan amendment.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, there is a comprehensive plan text amendment for your consideration. The state, let me go back actually. This starts on page 8 of your packet, and I apologize. In the original agenda, I didn't put the page numbers as requested before, so I left Lori left a hard copy with the page numbers on your dais there. But this comprehensive plan amendment agenda item starts on page 8. And I'll just briefly summarize. Statutory provisions in Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes related to comprehensive plans were amended to require each local government to adopt a property rights element into their comprehensive plan. So this is a brand new element that will be added to our comprehensive plan. The inclusion of the element is intended to provide or protect property rights and ensure that they are considered in local decision making. So we've included a copy of House Bill 59, which became law earlier this year. And because of that effective date on July 1st, this year, the state's land planning agency, which is the Department of Economic Opportunity, has insisted that every community adopt this element per this requirement, this new bill, before we can process any new comprehensive plan amendments. Now, that does not affect, according to them, the amendments that we had initiated through the first public hearings with you prior to that effective date of July 1st this year. So we do have a couple of applications that are in the process and are not held up by this. But all new applications for comprehensive plan amendments are going to be held up until this element is adopted and is effective. So the way this will work tonight is if you would make a recommendation to the City Council to transmit to the state for review. At the next City Council meeting, which is on this Tuesday, they will, if they approve transmittal of the amendment, it will be sent to the state for expedited review. That's a 30-day review. And then we should receive it back to ensure that it is consistent with the state law. And if it's so, then we will have to go through another series of public hearings to adopt it, which then requires another 31 days of an appeal process. So it has to be a waiting period after that final public hearing. So it won't really become effective until possibly November, I would say at the earliest. So right now we do have a few amendments on hold until this process is completed. I'm going to refer you to page 12 of your packet. And you will see right there's an excerpt from, or the portion there I'm just going to direct you to, from the statute or the new bill. It says here, it starts off with the following rights shall be considered in the local decision making. We just took that information and carried it over to the amendment. And so now I'm going to refer you to page 17 of your packet. And that is the new comprehensive plan amendment. This is the new property rights element. So if this is successful, this will be included into our comprehensive plan. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have about this agenda item.
So
Mr.
basically, the state didn't give us any choice.
That's correct.
As far as the legislative history, why does the state find this necessary, and particularly since property rights are already recognized under the U.S. Constitution, the Florida Constitution, and Florida statutes? I mean, frankly, it just seems to me that we're getting some laws that just keep beating us over the head as if they don't have our attention already. And this is just another one that they're doing that sounds good to certain circles. We're protectors of property rights, and here it is. Do you have any insight, legal counsel or Mr. Parrish, as to why they found this necessary?
I know this has been a topic that has been very important to some members of the legislature the past few years. So this has been brought up as a possible bill for several years, and it was just successful this year to get adopted. I can't say for sure why they believe it's necessary, considering the existing case law and constitutional law in place now. But because it is adopted, the Department of Economic Opportunity had no choice but to require every community to adopt it. And so I guess that's an unintended consequence of this is that it has actually held up some development because of this requirement until all the communities adopt this.
So our 2040 plan, for example, is held up?
No, sir. The first transmittal public hearing happened before this effective date.
Okay. All right.
So we have another amendment that went also. So we have two amendments.
Okay. Member Spardell.
What are the positives and negatives? You could do, I don't know, negatives first.
So if there are, we do have a couple of applications for small-scale amendments, which, by the way, the statute has changed on that as well. They are now 50 acres, not 10 acres. So an amendment that is less than 50 acres doesn't necessarily have to go to the state for review. So we do have a couple of applications that would mean, what it means is that there are a couple of developments potentially that cannot go forward until the land use amendments are changed or adopted. And that cannot happen until this element is adopted.
Okay, any other questions? City Attorney?
I don't have any additional information to add other than I believe it is interpreted by the League of Cities to, further infringe upon local rules as it's just, further expanding the state authority.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any cards on this item?
No, sir.
No cards on this item? So we'll open the public hearing and I guess close the public hearing since we don't have any cards on this item. Come back to the commission. What is your pleasure?
Oh, isn't that light up there?
No, sir.
Oh,
Sorry.
it doesn't? Okay. No, I was wondering why I was sitting here patiently. I was like,
Sorry,
oh,
sir.
maybe it's not lighting up. How many amendments is it holding up?
Currently 2.
2? And where were they in the process?
We received the applications after the effective date, which is July 1st. So
Okay,
we received them
So
recently.
they're not necessarily in front of this, they're behind this. They can't even be transmitted until this is approved?
Correct. We cannot process that. They will reject the amendments if we send it to the state. So we have not, we've accepted the applications, but not formally. So we have them in hand, but they are not going to be considered complete.
Okay.
So they won't be reviewed.
The first transmittal on those could be no sooner than November either then?
Correct.
Okay. And then, I mean, what you're recommending for adoption here is pretty much straight out of the state statute.
Yes.
But I guess there's no community that has had this pass yet.
No.
Okay.
In fact, we're probably one of the fastest.
And there's no, I guess the real proof to me is in the ordinance that implements the comp plan. What is that going to say? Do we have any idea what those ordinance changes are going to be to implement this property rights comprehensive plan amendment?
Are you talking about potentially changing the city's code?
Right.
And I don't know if we need to change the city's code in response to this element.
Okay.
We could consider that if we need to, but as Chairman Severs already mentioned, there's plenty of case law and constitutional law right now and statutes in place right now for protecting property rights that pretty much mimic what is here. So
I just thought that if you put something in your comp plan, then you have to adopt ordinances to implement the strategy in that comp plan. And so if we're not going to adopt any of those, then how are we implementing that strategy?
you don't necessarily have to adopt something. I mean, it's possible we can look at it, but not necessarily. If you can't do anything against your comprehensive plan, so this language here could be the rule that we follow, as opposed to coming up with something in addition to that in our code.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move for approval as written.
Just before that, City Attorney.
Thank you. I just was looking up some analysis in response to the chairman's question. I wanted to read a sentence from the analysis from the Florida Senate about the present situation, which was the cause for this legislative amendment. And amongst other things, it says, although these property rights are enshrined in the Florida Constitution, the state and local governments may curtail these rights through sovereign police powers. State police powers are derived from the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which affords states all rights and powers not delegated to the United States. Under this provision, states have police powers to establish and enforce laws protecting the welfare, safety, and health of the public. Regarding private property rights, courts have continuously held that even constitutionally protected property rights are not absolute and are held subject to the fair exercise of the power inherent in the state to promote the general welfare of the people through regulations that are necessary to secure the health, safety, good order, and general welfare.
A lot of interesting words, but I don't know that it says anything, to be honest about it. Okay, do we Mr. Rice, you do have a motion, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Roll call, please.
Secretary Richardson?
Yes.
Member Porter?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Member Rice?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidel? Yes. Chairman Severs?
Yes. Now added to the agenda was some discussion suggested by Member Richardson, so I will turn it over to you, sir.
I'm sure most of you saw the city council meeting of last week where they discussed the tree protection ordinance. You might have been in attendance. There were about 17 or 18 people that spoke. The debate on it lasted a couple hours. It is obvious that the tree protection ordinance, the decision will be between the staff's version of it and no tree protection ordinance. Several speakers spoke in opposition to drafting any ordinance. And in the last couple of days, well, let's be honest, we have spent, TEC has spent, the staff has spent, and the tree committee has spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the last 2 years debating this whole issue. And we've had special meetings and everything, but it comes down that they either passing the staff's version of the tree protection ordinance or nothing. So I talked this week to several people. They called me and I called them as a result. I talked to the vice mayor. I talked to Lloyd E. Thompson of the Environmental Commission. And I talked to Bruce Moya, who his opinion I really do respect. And they have all indicated they're getting behind the staff ordinance. And Bruce even sent me copies of a memo that I can't find. Would you pass those out? And would you pass these down? It's dated July the 20th to Mayor and City Council, but it says, Dear P&Z members, and the date on page 2 is May the 5th. So I don't know exactly when this letter was drafted, but because we've seen so many items of correspondence, you know, I don't know if I saw it or not. I tried to look for it. And he basically says, the second to last paragraph, in general, and he represents the Home Builders Association Boulevard. In general, we are in favor of the most recent language proposed by staff. So they favored the staff's version with a few tweaks. And apparently so do some members of the Environmental Commission. This version, the staff's version, is better than nothing. It goes a long way. While we may disagree with certain portions of it, it is moving in a forward direction. So I would think it would be in our best interest, should you desire, to tell the council that since the staff's version of the tree protection ordinance is the only version that they're going to consider, with a few tweaks, that we would recommend they approve it. But a lot of time has been spent on this subject, and a lot of time has been wasted. And the council didn't even consider our version, as well as the TEC's version, Mr. Rice's version, the tree team's version, and also what came from the homeowners group, their version. It was strictly the staff's version. And the only thing else opposing it was nothing. It looked pretty strong if you saw the meeting on videotape or saw it live or was in here for the meeting. I would guess that it's 50-50. And I think it is in our best interest. It's in the best interest of everybody involved that we united get behind the staff's version of the tree protection ordinance. So therefore, I would make a motion that we say if council is only considering the staff's version of the tree protection ordinance, we recommend approval.
Discussion.
Before asking for a second, legal counsel, is there any problem with making a motion at this stage as outlined by Mr. Richardson?
I think that this body has the ability to provide a recommendation on things that are coming before council that you have reviewed, and I think that's what he is intending to do, and I think it would be appropriate. It is just the first reading that the council heard at the last meeting, and they will review all of the input that's provided to them for the second reading.
Exactly. Thank you, Chelsea.
Okay. I just wanted to find out first whether or not it was appropriate to have that kind of motion. The next light I see, Member Porter, you had your light on.
Yeah. So let me understand.
Or do you want to second the motion?
No, I have a point of discussion.
Okay. Do we have a second to the motion? Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second to the motion, Member Porter, and then Member Rice would be next.
Okay. The only comment I have on the motion is we've discussed this before, and it's not up to us to try to make a recommendation to the council if they've already made up their mind. I mean, we spent many hours going through that tree ordinance, giving our recommendation, and now we're going to say accept the staff's draft just because that's the draft that we think the council is going to vote on. And I don't think that's right. We are a recommending body. And if our recommendations are our recommendations, I think we should stand firm on them.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Porter?
No.
Member Rice.
Well, I sort of feel like Mr. Porter does, but I mean, what's the whole point of us making a recommendation, 2 or 3 meetings ago on something? This is not a Rule 13 case because it's not the meeting right after we already made a motion to move forward. So how is this legal to even make a different recommendation than what we've already done?
Can I answer this?
Okay, Member, according to the lights, Member Richardson.
Okay.
Okay, so within the city code, section 31-31 talks about the Planning and Zoning Commission powers and duties. A, very first sentence, the commission shall act in advisory capacity to city council in all matters affecting the comprehensive plan and serve as the local planning agency pursuant to Florida statutes, the Local Government Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Development Regulation Act. That wasn't exactly what I was looking for. Let me look for another second. under Section E, other duties that may be assigned by the City Council and further of its legislative powers, and in Chapter 34, procedures of these LDRs and the specific needs of the city, including but not limited to review, recommend amendments to, and monitor comprehensive plan. And it goes on, then next is evaluate land development regulation and codes. And this tree protection ordinance is unique because there have been different versions, and P&Z did have their own version that they recommended to the City Council to approve. And I believe that to be a somewhat slightly different version than the staff version, not significantly, but the recommendation that was previously presented is the P&Z version. And staff has the flexibility of presenting a modification to that, which is what they have done with the staff version. And council is aware of these different versions and looking at the staff version because they rely on the professional planners to come up with the right formula for the city. And since that is being weighed by the City Council, if this body wanted to provide an additional recommendation in specific to the staff version that has been published in the agenda, but is different from the version that you previously provided a recommendation, then I can see how it would be possible, but it's not necessary. It's up to this commission to raise a subject as you feel appropriate, which was what Mr. Richardson did. And it's now his burden to convince the commission that you should provide a second recommendation on the same subject matter because there's another version. That's my understanding of this conversation.
Okay. In order of lights, Member Richardson, you're next.
Yes. Council has not made up their mind, but they have decided, apparently, that it will be either staff's version or no version at all, no tree protection ordinance. And while I stand by the version that we drafted and we worked on for months, if it's the decision the council is either going to go with the staff's version, which is good, it doesn't have exactly what we would like it to be, or no version at all. I think for the protection of the city of Titusville, we could say, would appear almost united, the TEC and the P&Z and the development community, to at least support the staff's version. That's my opinion, and I just came up with it after discussions and calls, lengthy calls sometimes with Mr. Bruce Moya, with the vice mayor, with Laura Lee Thompson, that I want us to take a positive view and get behind the council to pass something that we could stand for. We could stand up. I'll never be convinced that this version is better than ours, but it's just like, it doesn't happen now, but it used to. There was compromise in the halls of Congress, and that's what I think we'd do. Compromise, and the staff's version we stand up behind.
Okay, I need some clarification as to what is staff's version. The staff's version that was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, for example, for industrial and commercial was, as I recall, 25%. I understand there's a possibility that a revised staff version has that at 15%. What is the current staff's version? Because I'm not sure. And the maker of the motion, I want to make sure we're supporting whichever version you want to support as a part of your motion. So which is it?
I'd have to take a moment to see what is on the city council's agenda to see there, but
I have it pulled up.
well, let me just bring this point up. So even if we have this available to you, we share it with you, it's not on your agenda currently. It wasn't brought up before, so if you're considering amending your recommendation from what you previously made on our...
No amendment.
Okay.
Right, right.
Right, so I'm just a little curious as to what this motion would be. Is it...
Council has decided,
Yeah.
pretty much, that it's either the staff's version they want to consider or no version.
So,
I would just add that the council listened to public comment and there was some discussion, but I don't think that they fully engaged in the discussion on this ordinance yet. I think that is to be determined or to be heard at the second reading, which hasn't happened yet. And if you go to the city council agenda, first of all, I do agree with everything Brad said and I have more to say about that. But if you go to the last council agenda packet, the recommended action is to conduct that first reading. And then at the end of that paragraph, it says the Titusville Environmental Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission have recommended tree protection ordinances, which are included in the agenda packet. And the packet of this last agenda includes the staff version 4, comparison of code and ordinance, conservation and parkland map, vacant residential map, vacant commercial map, vacant industrial map, vacant commercial/industrial lands, large trees by subdivision, P&Z recommended ordinance, Appendix A, TEC recommended ordinance, canopy requirements by jurisdiction, heritage trees by jurisdiction, mitigation costs, and council direction to staff. So there's like a dozen different attachments to that agenda packet that the council had at their disposal. And I didn't hear them say or make a motion or vote that they're only looking at the staff's version. So I think it would be presumptuous maybe to say that that's the only one they're looking at when they are being presented with all of this additional information.
Well,
Mr. Richardson has a right to be presumptuous if he wants to.
yeah,
I know I'm being flippant, but he made a motion. I just want to make sure I know what his motion entails. And as I understand what you're saying, the last version is in the agenda packet. Was that, what was it as far as the percentage for industrial and commercial?
So section 3 is canopy requirements. That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
The industrial total canopy as a percentage of development areas is 15% for industrial and minimum reserve is 10%.
Okay.
I'd make a point that there were several meetings this week already that
This is the
Peggy and I think Brad participated in, and Eddie. The city manager participated in several of them. Richard Broom participated in a lot of them. And that's the way it appears to be going.
Okay. So as I understand, Mr. Richardson, that is your motion.
It
is the version that the council just identified to us as far as if they're not going to pass what the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended, you would respectfully urge that they pass the latest staff version that appeared in that agenda packet.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The second, is that your understanding as well?
Yes. Is this an active, would it be more appropriate to say that P&Z accepts or understands, I don't know what verb to use.
You could say supports as a secondary alternative or something like that.
I was thinking of an active faith. Is that appropriate wording?
I would amend
Mr.
my
Rice,
motion to
you'll
include that
that
language.
as a part of your motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think Member Grant, you had your light on, and you can. Sorry, Member Porter.
So I want to make sure I understand what we're saying. Member Richardson, you're saying the council, in your opinion, is going to approve either the staff version or no version?
Yes.
Okay. So my comment to that is,
That's your
if we're if they're going to say no to all of the versions, I would say, yes, I agree with you. But I thought it was council who tasked us to go off and draft a version. And they had strong language as far as being strong in whatever we came up with in that version. So now you're telling me there's a possibility of them saying no to any version? That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yes, in fact,
That just doesn't make sense to me.
said our version was far too complicated.
That's
and-
our recommendation.
Yeah.
So how they feel about it, I don't care. I mean, that was our recommendation. The point that they don't want to approve anything just doesn't make sense to me.
I agree.
Member Grant, you're on first. So.
I agree with Mr. Porter on that one. Council will make the decision, and if they just choose to do staff's version or TEC's version, then that's their right. We did the job that we were requested to do. You're right. They said it at our recommendation was too complicated. And they were saying that we added too much when it comes to industrial and commercial tree protection. You know, if you remember, I think they mentioned that in the last meeting. In fact, I won't mention who, but there was one who seemed not to want any tree protection or canopy in commercial or industrial at all. It was not needed. It was only residential.
Okay, please remember our recommendation on commercial and industrial was staff's version. We recommended what staff recommended.
We added maybe a percentage or two higher than that.
No. We did on residential, but not on commercial. We recommended the same staff recommended to us their revised version. So, and you remember we had the realtors all show up upset with and mad at us because we were requiring all this additional requirements on commercial and industrial, and I quickly pointed out to them, all we did was the same thing that staff had recommended to us, and I asked them, did you know that? No, they didn't know that.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
So that silenced a lot of their concern. But Member Grant, you still got the floor. Sorry. I just wanted to clarify that.
No, you're absolutely correct. Thanks for jogging my memory there. You're absolutely right. You did say they did say that. It just seems like listening to the council meeting last Tuesday is that they have made up their mind the way they want to go, and there's nothing we can do about it. We gave them what we thought was a good ordinance.
Yes, sir.
They
Yes, sir.
rejected it, apparently.
Yes, sir. Member Spidell.
I like this, I really like what Mr. Porter said and what Mr. Grant said, but we are recommending, we can't legislate. That's their job. And it is frightening to me that it's staff or nothing. And the time element here, we've watched the bulldozers, we've watched the fires all summer long. I think we're in a corner now. We've done what we were charged to do, so we can go on the record and feel good that we did spend the last 18 months or longer in doing what we were charged to do. Staff has made some adjustments. I'd like to read it over again and compare it, but I've just about had enough of it. And if the answer is nothing, that's just shocking.
Member Richardson, you're next.
I would just add to what Member Spidell just said. I'm not taking a reversal of position. I'm just trying to make the thing as much unity as possible. That the staff's version, while I don't think it's the best, if the choice is, and I guarantee it's going to be either the staff's version or nothing. If you saw the meeting, you know that. that we get behind the staff's version of it. It's almost like handing them a peace treaty. We get behind the staff's version. It's not perfect, but we do get behind the staff's version versus no ordinance at all. And the last speaker last week, you know who he was? He recommended denial of everything.
Member Rice, I'll get back to you.
Well, I'm really struggling with, one, we've made a recommendation, although I didn't really care for what we presented to them. I'm struggling with voting on something that I haven't reviewed, that I don't have in front of me. And I don't want to cast my vote in the blind, so to speak. I just don't know that I can support it because of that, because I just need to know what I'm voting on, and I don't know that I know that. Because it's more than just the tree camp. It's the entire ordinance, and that's where I'm struggling. So the council's going to do what they think is right. They're the legislative body. We've made a recommendation. I think we should just stand with it.
I would like to add that I feel like I'm in a catch-22 with how to recommend advice to you all because it's not on the agenda, and if you're going to take action on something, it should properly be on the agenda. However, there's no time for that with the council's second hearing at the next meeting. So I don't want to be the one to say you can't make this decision when time is of the essence.
Member Grant.
No, I'm just trying to figure out why is it necessary for us to agree with staff? I mean, we've already made our recommendations and let the chips fall where they may. You know, that's the way I see it. Nothing we can do about it, really.
Okay. All right. Member Spardell.
Is it appropriate to just send a statement to council that in an active that we support? There's or we have an active faith in what they've recommended. I don't mean another recommendation, but.
Well, I think the purpose of Mr. Richardson's motion is to send a message. We would rather you adopt what we recommend to begin with. If you're not going to do that, we would recommend you adopt the staff's version.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
the bottom line.
Exactly.
Or recommend adopting a version.
Something.
I mean, because you don't want no version.
Yeah.
The point of the argument is they wanted a tree ordinance. And several organizations or groups went out and drafted a tree ordinance. Whether it's our staff, TEC, the burden is on them. And we've done what they asked us to do. So if they can go no, to me, that's just defeating the purpose of the request.
So that would be a modification to the motion to include any previously presented ordinances. Okay.
Yeah, we'd need to hear the motion one more time so we have it clear.
Well, the motion, as I understand it, correct me, Mr. Richards, am I wrong? Number one, that the Planning and Zoning Commission stands by its earlier recommendation as far as a tree ordinance. And in the event the City Council is not proceeding with that one, that we would recommend the current staff's version be approved by the City Council.
Why is this necessary? Why is that necessary to do that?
It's not necessary other than I believe that Mr. Richardson, he can speak for himself certainly, but he believes that if we show some unity and support to have a tree ordinance, even if it's not exactly one that P&Z wants, that's better than not getting a tree ordinance at all. And if it's a staff's version, great.
Exactly.
And if it's not the staff version?
Then we will find out.
But I'm saying,
We will find out.
I'm with Mr. Grant. What difference does it make? If
It's
it's not
the-
the staff version,
It's going to be nothing.
okay.
Yeah, I bet you
Member Spidell, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I haven't really spoken yet on this.
I think I may have lost my train of thought. I hate to use the word assume that there are people on council who are voting against or voting for the none. And that's the fear, that we don't have enough votes to get any of it. So it's just an act of faith that we've accepted the staff. They love staff. It's obvious.
Anything else?
That's it.
I'd just like to say a couple of things. Like many of you, I think we're disappointed at the direction that this is going before the city council. However, that's their prerogative. The buck stops with them. I think if TEC and the Planning and Zoning Commission went too far and included all these provisions of canopy, et cetera, someone should have told us up front, don't waste your time doing that. And I clearly heard that message, we all went too far. This has been pending more than 2 years. And communications, which was our number one item, again, breaks down somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure where. But don't waste my time, staff's time, our time. And like Mr. Rice, he prepared a complete ordinance. And if that's too complicated, they didn't want all of that, well, tell us up front. I realize you can tell us in the end, that's your prerogative. But likewise, we want to be constructive in our input into the process. One of the items that was in the agenda package at page 233, large preserve removed by subdivision and inches large trees preserved removed by subdivision. If you simply looked at subdivision A, B, C, and D as representative, I believe all of these probably had wetlands. Forested wetlands. So a lot of the preserved trees are in forested wetlands. And the remark was made at the meeting, why do we need the ordinance since we already have this protection? We don't need it. I think this chart is totally misleading because subdivision A, for example, I believe not one tree in the uplands was preserved, not one. And one of the purposes behind this ordinance was to preserve trees within the area of alteration as I understood it. And this is misleading. And no one seems to have the knowledge or bothers telling the council what this represents. They don't seem to understand that, and I don't know why someone doesn't speak up and speak the truth about some of these things. I mean, I was frankly discouraged watching it. For example, I'll give you another example. A council member said, well, if I've done 150 units in a planned subdivision and I have sketch plat approval and I have 1,100 units still remaining, I'm grandfathered in. I don't have to comply with this new ordinance. That's the way some council members are looking at it. And Peggy, to her credit, says, well, you only have 100 approved in Tranquility. The other 2,000, then they don't have to comply? That was the conversation that she pointed out, and I have a transcript saying that. And I would hope that staff is able to convince, if they believe in the tree protection ordinance, that there is protection and that all these things are not going to be grandfathered in, even though they don't have don't have sketch plat approval, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the confusing things to me, because I remembered on Brooks Landing, whenever Gabriel was here, I asked him the question that preserving trees in wetlands, does that count towards the 10%? He said, no, that's separate. I believe that is being interpreted different from subdivision to subdivision. I may be 100% wrong, but I've seen subdivisions approved with the only preserved trees and wetlands and no 10%. So everybody needs to be on the same page and following the same rules and the same interpretations, and they shouldn't vary from one subdivision to the next, which appears to me to be happening. So I'm going to support, Mr. Richardson, your motion, because I would, after all this time and effort, I would hope we would get some form of tree protection ordinance. Mr. Richardson, your light is on.
In full disclosure, I've had conversations with former TEC chairman and P&Z chairman, vice chairman, Brian Bobbitt, for several months. And I just wanted to disclose that. And once again, I believe strongly in the draft that P&Z presented to council. But I think that we can only decide to get behind the staff's version, because I'd hate to think if there's no version enacted.
Not seeing any other lights, roll call. Again, the motion is that made by Member Richardson and has been seconded, that the Planning and Zoning Commission continues to support its recommended version. However, if that's not acceptable, then we would recommend the latest staff version be approved by the City Council. Roll call, please.
Member Grant?
You're on first.
Well, in light of those eloquent words, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. Yes.
Uh-oh.
Secretary Richardson?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell?
Yes.
Member Rice?
No.
Member Porter?
Yes.
Chairman Severs?
Yes. Okay, getting back to the agenda, the next item is petition to request from the public. Would you like to be heard? Do you have a petition or request, sir?
You just came for the excitement?
Okay. Yes, sir.
You're not going to come back either, are you? Oh, you will.
All right, the next report, capital improvements program.
Last year, we suggested to you to come to kind of get yourself involved in the city's budget process, which really started back in late January, early February. We invited you to a public workshop that the council held about strategic initiatives, about goal setting to start off the budget process. I believe some of you did attend that event earlier this year. Since then, the different departments have been working on a draft budget, as we do every year, and a draft was proposed and presented to City Council at their budget workshop on August 11th. We also, the staff, had also offered to you to involve you in how the capital improvements element schedule, the 5-year schedule capital improvements element that we present to you usually around November every year. By state statute, we have to present that to you, so it's adopted no later than the 1st of December to update the schedule of capital improvements inside our city's comprehensive plan. A lot of those projects that are city projects that are concurrency related in that schedule come from our budget. And so you're seeing a draft here of some capital improvement items that will be carried over into that 5-year schedule to update the schedule in our comprehensive plan. Just a reminder, though, that some of the items you see in that schedule every year to update our comprehensive plan, those are only projects that address how the city meets or exceeds its level of service standards for concurrency-related facilities. And what that means is we have in our comprehensive plan level of service standards for roadway capacity, for capacity for water, how we provide that, sewer, stormwater requirements, a solid waste, how many lifts we pick up, and parks, the number of park acreage we have per resident. So we have to address how, if we are going to be, we have to analyze every year whether we're going to be deficient in any way due to growth on any one of those standards and how we're going to address it. And we have to include that inside our capital improvements element. And so we do that every year. We bring that to you. And so last year there was some questions about that, and that's why we decided to invite you to that kickoff meeting with council back in February, I believe, is when the workshop. And then now today we're presenting to you the first draft of excerpts of that draft budget to you, but only for the capital improvement projects that we believe will most likely end up on the capital improvements element, which you'll see later this year. So if you go to page 20 of your packet, you'll see the first set of items there. This isn't a draft that's being proposed or requested of council by the public, primarily the Public Works Department. The first item there, it's called road resurfacing, and it's got an asterisk there, so that's just being requested of council. And then it's proposing what that cost might be on an annual basis. And I believe I was told that this item and the one just below it, the gateway landscaping, are the only two items that are even partially or fully funded right now. The rest of the items there are not funded and are just being requested. So some of these items might be carried over to, if the budget is adopted later this year, or later this in September, some of these items will be carried over to the capital improvements element. If they're not funded, they will just be pushed out several years on that 5-year schedule so that they are there, and then we can always pull them in when we need to at a certain time when funding is available. If you go to the next page, page 21, not all of these items from the Water Resources Department are going to be carried over to that capital improvements element that you'll see later this year in November. Some of them will, a lot of them will not. We have to determine which items are related to concurrency. So, for example, an item that helps us maintain an existing water system or helps us expand a water system would be considered concurrency related and would obviously be carried over to that schedule. Items that you see here that are not going to be considered concurrency related, that don't not help us strictly meet our level of service standard or exceed our level of service standard, then they're not going to be carried over to that schedule that you'll see later on today, this year. So I really want you to understand the difference here between what you're seeing tonight and what you're going to see later this year in November. The next item on page 22, honestly, I think there's only one item on there that most likely will be carried over, and that's a truck with, a truck that was going to be requested by the Public Works Department for solid waste to help provide services, solid waste services to our citizens and to our commercial developments. And so if there's a need, because there's a need for additional capacity, in other words, additional trucks to handle the additional growth, that's something that would be carried over to our capital improvements element schedule, which you'll see later, because that is helping us meet a level of service standard. The rest of the things you see on this page most likely will not be carried over. page 23 of your packet, these are projects that are primarily related to stormwater. These, I believe a couple of these are currently in the most recently adopted capital improvements element. Depending on, these numbers might not be final. These project lists that you see here might not be final. So that will be finally adopted by City Council as part of the budget in September, like I said earlier. But once that's done, then we decide which projects are concurrency related and we'll carry it over. That concludes my description of this item. We wanted to give you an opportunity to look at what is being proposed. That's what we offered to you earlier this year. There is no need for an action on this. We're not asking for a recommendation, but if you would like to make any comment or you have any questions, I'll do my best to explain them. But if they get too technical, I might have to refer to or direct you to another department or a contact that you might want to speak to directly if you have specific questions that I can't answer.
Member Richardson.
It's not too technical of a question, Brad. First of all, I did not see anything regarding water reuse. And I think Chairman Severs and I brought that up for the last 2 years.
So my understanding, and the Water Resources Department has been working on a master plan, did receive a draft from the consultant and made recommendations for changes. And so they are working on it now, and hopefully they'll have that back. And my understanding is it's supposed to be adopted later this year, potentially, if everything's good. We should note, too, that if there are projects that are going to be recommended out of there and that are cost feasible enough to be able to be put in a 5-year schedule as opposed to a long-term project, that might be something we want to include in the 5-year schedule. Obviously, it'd be put in the budget if it's going to be in that, if it's something that could be funded immediately.
Well,
one other thing you should know, too, is a statute. The legislature just adopted a new requirement that all cities that adopt a reclaimed water master plan. And so we're well ahead of the game.
well, we adopted water reuse back in the 80s. And as I think Mr. Severs pointed out some time back, there are items in the capital improvements budget that they just died last year. And but I understand what you're saying. And I want to correct one thing that I was asked by a member of council. I may have had a stroke, and I slur my words and I drag my foot sometimes, but my mind is as good as it used to be. And I remember in 1968, we had the Golden Glow. There were GE Lucalox lights. There's a picture in the Florida Today. It was called the Today newspaper of Mayor Wendell Cease under the Golden Glow. We paid for that Golden Glow. And I was asked by a councilman that was told by a member staff that those street lights came from Army or government surplus. That is not true.
Member Grant.
One of the things that chapped my hide is this our recent boil water notice. And what bothers me is that it took so long, when it was first detected supposedly, it took so long before they would notify the public that we needed to boil water. I think it was at least two days minimum. Now, if it really was a contaminants in the water, which I understand it wasn't, right? How many people would have gotten seriously sick before they knew what the world was going on? I understand now we have a new, they use a 24-hour tester, but we didn't have that originally. my question is, there is no better way to test our water to make and to notify the public sooner that we may have a problem than wait 48 hours or more? And if it is, why isn't it on here?
I recall from the Water Resources Director's presentation to City Council that they are looking into how, they're looking at what happened and whether they can improve the process. So I know that's something they're evaluating as far as the notification process. But I also understand from that presentation that it was a raw water. It wasn't, this was water that's being drawn before it's actually treated. So I think they were just required on an abundance of caution to provide that notice. But as far as how that notice was disseminated, they're evaluating whether how they can improve that. That's the best answer I can give you, sir. I don't know if you saw the presentation, but we can certainly send you a link to. Okay.
Likewise, I saw the presentation. The city does need to improve its method of communication and decide upon whether just to rely upon the county emergency management system or what, because even though it seems to me, from what I heard the Water Resources Director say, that whenever they found out the results of the test within 48 hours, they immediately did take action. Unfortunately, I'm aware of numerous people that never got the notice. And so truly, if there is an emergency, we need to have a better way of communicating somehow. And the city tends to defer to somebody else to take care of that. And some of these things, they need to be, in my mind, a little more proactive. One question I had was, I realize some of these items are supported by the general fund budget, some are not, obviously. Do we know what the millage rate under the draft budget that's presented to City Council? The reason why I'm asking, I got my tax notice today, and I can't believe the numbers I saw in there, that and the current rate was around 7.2 mils. The rollback rate is 6.8, and the request of the city is 8.2, which is off the chart. Of course, my taxes are off the chart.
You want to know when the meeting is for the
Pardon?
budget? Were you asking when is the meeting for the budget? Oh, okay.
The draft budget. They always prepare a draft. I realize they advertise probably 10%, but what is reality here? And I guess my second question.
Sir, would you like the answer? Or
Do you have an answer?
Yes.
What is it?
The tentative operating millage rate is 7.9360 mils, which is 10% above the revenue neutral rollback rate of 7.2145 mils. The voted debt service levy of 0.3147 mils is 46.93% below the maximum levy authorized by the Series 2000.
I will provide you my notice, because those numbers do not match up the notice I received in the mail today. We need to make sure, whatever it is, it's accurate. Maybe the property appraiser sent the wrong information. I don't know.
Maybe we have a communications problem.
I don't know. I was shocked by the numbers.
Okay.
And I think Woody, when I said those, he was shocked too.
So I think I'm reading a report that's not published or correct. I'm reading from the September 15th that hasn't been finalized report. So.
Okay. Well, in looking at I see Riverside Drive Force Main, is that $3,500,000 under 2023? So is that eliminating the one lift station and rerouting someplace else?
Which page are you on, sir?
Page 21.
21, and is it called?
Account 401-5555565.
They're all the same. What's the project name?
Riverside Drive Force Main,
Oh, here, I'm sorry. Okay, so yes, it looks like,
$3,500,000.
so it's being proposed in a budget, not this year's budget, but potentially being requested for next year's budget.
Yes. I thought there were money already budgeted for this, is what I've been told in the past. So that's part of the reason why I asked. And is it eliminating of the lift station and rerouting, or?
That's
I
a
mean,
good question.
we do have a force main right next to the river. We got exposed during storms and fortunately didn't break. And the other Indian River force main upgrade, do you happen to know what that is?
No, sir. Those are
Okay.
two questions I can try and get answered for you, though.
Okay.
Provide that.
All right. And I agree, and certainly Mr. Rice could chime in if he wants to about the reclaimed water, because he was heavily involved in getting that project off the ground, and as a council member. And it just seems to me if we are going to proceed with a new plan and hopefully recharging the wells, if that's appropriate, there ought to start budgeting money for it. Member Rice.
Well, yeah, I do remember a lot about reuse of the whole water sewer, $70 million bond issue. My question, though, is on the Gateway Landscape Improvement. What is that?
So, council received a presentation from Public Works Department and I believe a consultant that they had procured to do landscape enhancements on several intersections in the city, primarily using funds from our tree trust fund. And so the illustrations that were provided to us showed trees and other shrubbery at major intersections and some other select smaller intersections in the city. I don't believe the entire proposal, that the money that's available in our tree trust fund is enough to fund the whole thing. But that was, I think they were asked as to which intersections would be a priority. So I think it's coming back. I think they'll come back with some changes to it. But I can find that out for
And where
you.
I'm driving this at is, I haven't seen the plan. I don't want to criticize the plan because I don't know what it says, but the Landscape Trust Fund came from tree mitigation money, is basically where it comes from. So to me, the program that should be funded with that money is tree canopy programs. Okay? Nothing else. We need to spend the money to address planting of trees that will produce good canopy, not ground cover, nothing else. I mean, because that's where it came from. And that's sort of how we go about offsetting what got cleared and what got paid in for the Landscape Trust Fund. So I just curious. But that was sort of my gut instinct, was that I just didn't know what Gateway Landscape Improvements was for that kind of money. It was, $1.3 million total over the 2 years, and I don't know how much is left in the Landscape Trust Fund, but it's.
I think what you see here in this first year is probably what's available in that trust
In the
fund.
Landscape Trust Fund, 435?
Yeah.
423.
423. So I'd be happy to send over to the commission what was presented to City Council.
Okay. All right, I was just curious on that one, and then Dwight brought up the other ones that I was interested with, the upgrades to the sewer system along the river, because I think that's another focus that we probably need to concentrate on.
Else have any questions? No action is required, so we will move on to the next item, City Council Summary of Action. Information only. Is there any member have any questions concerning the Summary of Action? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I have a couple questions on this.
Yes, sir.
'Cause I was just scanning through it and was wondering some things. Page 29 of the agenda, item number F, okay, which was the right-of-way vacation. for Riverside Drive that we considered a few months. It was tabled, it was supposed to come back, and according to the summary, the applicant withdrew it. And so how does that affect the developer's agreement? Because I thought it was a requirement of the developer's agreement to do this.
So it was a requirement of the development agreement to submit an application to FDOT to get a dedicated right turn lane at the intersection there of Terrier Trail and US 1, and to vacate that segment of Riverside Drive. It also said in the same condition that if the FDOT rejected the right turn lane, that they're not obligated to go any further.
Including the right-of-way vacation?
So that the FDOT issued them issued the city to them through the city a permit to do modifications to the intersection to change the radius, the curvature of the right turn there, but not a dedicated right turn lane. And then also recommended, I think they supported vacating that segment of Riverside Drive. We ran this by our legal staff to see what they are actually obligated to do, and it was determined that they fulfilled the requirements of that condition. Went and submitted and got a permit rejected basically by FDOT. So they felt that they were not obligated to go forward and vacate that segment of that right of way. I don't know about the intersection. I don't know if they're going to do that now. So they withdrew their application, and that doesn't mean they might not resubmit. They might find it beneficial to them to do that later. But there were a lot of other hurdles that were coming about and through that process where they were going to have to provide to us a series of easements and easements to FDOT and to others because there's so much infrastructure in that right of way. So I think they felt like they weren't obligated any further. Okay. And we determined that they had met the requirement of the condition, so that's what happened.
Right, and then my next item was right under that 10, the low impact LID. Why was it withdrawn by staff?
This was the city management decision because of the budget during September, and then also, so I believe it may come back re-advertised either the end of September and most likely in no later than October.
So it is going to come back to city council.
I believe it will. It's a matter of time. I think when is the question. It's just there were a lot of conflicts with several special meetings that the council had to complete as far as the budget, and that was in addition to other very difficult items like the tree ordinance and the amount of time taken for that and some other items as well. So it was determined by the city management to delay that particular ordinance.
It was delayed because of scheduling and work schedules.
Correct.
Basically, it's had nothing to do with what was in the LID ordinance.
No, they never discussed it. No.
So council chewed us out for not passing the lid ordinance in time, and we did, and now they're going to delay it probably until September, October? That was just a comment, Brad.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's it. That's all.
Any other member have a question concerning the summary of action? If not, I did have a follow-up to Member Rice's question about the Riverside Drive vacation. As I understood you to say that legal determined that they had fulfilled their obligations and were not required to proceed under that. If that's the case, I vehemently express concern about the failure to enforce or follow the development agreement throughout this process when we just had Tranquility Bay come before us, required to amend theirs for amending the length of the cul-de-sac, the timing of the clearing of an area for a trail, and additional time to assess the need for a fire station. Because under the Riverside Drive Developers Agreement, which is a guide which is supposed to be followed for development of the property, they agreed in writing to have, for example, 3 buildings instead of they built, staff is permitted 2, which creates a larger mass. It's certainly cheaper for them to build 2 than 3. They agreed in writing to have units that were 1,200 square feet up to 4,000 square feet. According to the building official, those units are 1,201 to 1,747 approximately, maybe it's less than 1,800. None are 2,000, none are 3,000, and it was express provision of the developers agreement and never been an amendment to the developers agreement to do less than that. And I remember sitting down, and I'm sure Mr. Broom remembers sitting down since he drafted the agreement, and the developer saying, well, I'm going to build these big, beautiful units, and they will be this size units. There was never processing an amendment to the developers agreement. And last but not least, on the southerly end, there's supposed to be a road coming in from the south end, which would relieve some of the traffic. There's never been an amendment to that. That should have been a mandatory requirement of issue a permit. In July of 2019, I contacted the city attorney's office, contacted other officials in the development division about the entrances to this property in 2019. I brought it up several times over the years. I mean, does the city only understand if I threaten a lawsuit? You would think if the development agreement requires the city and the developer to do something, you would do it. What I see is happening. The city has been set up by this developer to come back with an amendment that doesn't address that entrance whatsoever, because it makes absolutely no sense to have a road from the south in across that track. And let me just stop for a minute, because Mr. Attorney John Evans reminded me recently that the reason why there was that road and the reason why that retention pond was on that about 200-foot strip of land was an open view for the people driving up and down US 1 for a view of the river. That has seemed to have gotten lost by the developer and staff in this whole process. And I know you weren't here in 2007, but there was a move afoot to buy that land for view of the public seeing the Indian River. I know what's going to happen. You're going to get an application, and someone will want to build individual townhouses or individual units all along that 400-foot strip and put those 25 units there. And frankly, staff, you have been set up by not requiring them to follow the agreement. They still could build that road today. And it's logical to build it today because none of the parking lot has been built. And for someone to say, well, it's because we changed the rules in 2017, you only need one entrance for 100 units. Well, guess what? The agreement and the state statute clearly say that the rules and regulations at the time the development agreement was entered to are in force and effect. There was a requirement to have 2 ingresses and egresses. And in my mind, and I think at that time in 2007, the north, which is blocked completely as emergency access by Horn, is not an ingress-egress for the people to get in and out. And I would respectfully suggest, if they've complied with the agreement here, please make them comply with the agreement they agreed to. They agreed to do this. And I don't understand why it wasn't done originally. And I'm frankly disappointed because I think perhaps there may have been a position to require the southerly entrance to relieve some of the traffic burden at the intersection. And frankly, that just makes common sense. And why they're not protecting their own residents by building that doesn't make any sense either. I think the major issue, there are certain players in this community who want to buy that land and build along there. And guess what will happen to the original intent of the agreement of keeping an open view to the public? And Mr. Parrish, you may not know that. I don't know whether you knew that or not. But certainly Mr. Broom knows it because he drafted the agreement. And it's a little irritating to see Tranquility being required to do all these things, to change minor things and major things like this on this development not being required. It is wrong, simply plain flat wrong. And I don't understand why it hasn't been done. And I have brought this up since July of 2019. Mr. Rice, you had your hand.
Well, I'd just like to add that I had gone home after we tabled it and looked at it a little closer, and the right-of-way vacation made a lot of sense to me, okay? Providing the third entrance was there because it was going to allow, people would have a tendency to go down that path and turn in right in instead of going to the light, which would have taken more pressure off that light from turning right into it. Anyone that lived in that development would have turned right on US 1, not going to the light, okay? So it made sense that the right turn lane wasn't really required at the light anymore. We could have vacated it, had the right turn in and came in, and that made a lot of sense to me. And the traffic study didn't really address that very well, okay? But the numbers would have decreased even more at the light had that third entrance come in to the development, because that's the path of least resistance, and that's where most of the people coming into that development would have gone, was in that US 1 southern entrance coming into the site. And I think it does relieve a lot of pressure off that intersection. So that was just, when I went back to look at it, trying to prepare for the table to come back, that's the conclusion I came to after looking at all the data. So just for what it was worth.
Appreciate your comments, sir. Anything else on the council report of August 10th? Okay, moving along with the agenda, the next item is staff report.
I just have a couple of things I want to bring up to you. Several meetings ago, I asked if you would be interested in like a 45-minute to an hour webinar training as a group before your regular meetings at 5 o'clock in this room. Plan Edison is an organization that provides a lot of different webinar trainings for planning commissioners and for planners nationally. And we went ahead and registered for one of their online courses, one for subscription that we can sit down together and watch. Unfortunately, I can't get one subscription for each of you. It's just too expensive. But anyway, I would like to go ahead and schedule a 5 o'clock. We'll, of course, create a notice through the city clerk's office that more than 2 of you will be present, and we'll just attend. I'll show one of the webinars, and we can talk about it or ask questions about it at the end, and then your regular meeting will start at 6 o'clock. That's what was suggested last time, and I think everybody agreed to that. So I'll go ahead and schedule those and send you an invite to those. There's no obligation to come to them. If you do not want to come to the particular topic that's going to be presented, then you don't need to. Just come to your regular meeting instead. So I'll send those out to you very soon. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? There are several, but I'm not going to suggest that I show all of them. There's 10 of them altogether. There's like one that says Intro to Planning. I didn't want to bore you with that kind of stuff. But there are a few topics that I thought were very helpful, like such as what is a comprehensive plan, ethics for planning officials, and the basic lean framework for planning officials. How does zoning work, constitutional limits of planning and zoning. So I can share this with you again so you can tell me which ones you want in particular, and if I get a majority on a few particular items, and we'll start with those.
Is there a time limit on when you can do these?
I think we had these for a year.
For a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll share, I think I shared it with the rest of you before. I think, Member Rice, you weren't on here when I last had this, but I can share you this with you as well. The other thing I wanted to mention to you was some of you may know what the Affordable Housing Advisory Council is. We have a division in our Community Development Department called Neighborhood Services. And some of you may know who Terry Franklin is. She's the supervisor there, or director of that particular division. And she handles a lot of our community development block grant money and SHIP money, which is housing, affordable housing money that we use to allow property owners to rehabilitate their homes and to provide affordable housing in certain areas of the city as well. So she has sent out a request for input on a plan and then also a request to meet for the next few months to work on an incentive plan. And so there are two different topics going on. One that's she's asking for people to meet, and most likely virtually, considering the circumstances going on right now. And then the other invite is just to provide input individually. So typically, there is a Planning and Zoning Commission member who is appointed as a liaison on that committee. Member Chambers from a few years ago was the last commission member who was on that committee. The committee only meets as needed whenever a plan needs to be updated. And so it's going to be convened. Our first meeting is going to be on September 8th. And these are tentative dates. They're going to be every second Wednesday from 2 to 4 p.m. It might not last that long. My experience with this previously was only about an hour or so, but that's the tentative schedule right now. So I would like to ask the commission if anyone would like to volunteer, someone will be appointed to be on this commission, to be a liaison on this Affordable Housing Committee.
I'd volunteer because I used to be on the Titusville Housing Authority.
Okay.
And I'm quite familiar with those issues. If no one else, okay.
Okay. Well, then I don't know if there needs to be a motion. I'm not sure how this worked last time, but I can certainly pass the information on to you. And if there isn't a motion that's necessary, then some formal action, I'll come back to you.
I don't know whether there is, so for an abundance of caution, could we have something to the
Do
effect?
we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes. Opposed, no? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll pass this information on to you, Mr. Richardson. Thank you. That's all I have. Oh, by the way, Popeyes is, we know for sure now that's actually going to happen.
I saw the message on Facebook. It says that Popeyes is going to open, but their franchisee is waiting to hear that he can open. The employees have been hired, and they've been trained, and he's waiting for Popeyes corporate to give him permission to open.
One other thing I want to mention, just to remind you that the City Council's budget hearings are September 8th and 15th. That's all I have.
Thank you. City Attorney?
I have no further update. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairperson, a couple of items. First, I want to thank Eddie for being very responsive concerning why Riverside Drive was closed and has been closed for more than 2 months. I naively thought it was the developer that was doing water sewer connection, and it's not. It's currently closed due to an installation of a second-generation baffle box that's being placed within the road on Riverside Drive. I did look at the website that he wasn't certain when that was going to reopen. There was some delay, etc. I looked on the website as far as what's going on as far as the river. it says on the website this will be finished in 2022. I live on Riverside Drive. I don't remember any citizen getting a notice that the road would be closed 2 months, 6 months, or however long it is. And this is a communication issue, and I don't know why. Maybe there was a notice. All I know is there was a sign up flashing that the effective June the 15th or whatever date it was going to be closed. But if you're closing a street for months, you would think you would communicate with the residents that if it's going to be closed and give them an idea how long it's going to be closed, just as a common sense, practical item. The next thing is I'd like to pass down a letter I received from a Stephen Buchanan. It's kind of surprised me to receive, but I guess you could say it's from him as a letter of apology because an issue came up before the City Council dealing with outdoor seating. He indicates as a senior planner himself before the county how he would have handled that, since I appeared as if I didn't know what was going on, which I didn't. As far as that there was opposition to this and that people being organized against it. And anyway, and Chelsea, I believe you received a copy as well. And I just passed that along as his communication that he provided me concerning that item. And the last item I'd like to pass down and basically effective as of tomorrow, I'll be resigning as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I feel I reviewed my options at the time of asking for reappointment. There was major issues dealing with the 2040 plan, the tree protection ordinance, and low impact development ordinance that I wanted to be involved and try to give some input on. This is not as a result of any one item that I'm upset or mad about. I've done what I thought I needed to do, and I think it's time. There's a lot of other important issues I would like to be involved in. I strongly believe in giving back to the communities and other projects that I feel as though I can serve better the community. I will be, just as when I retired as city attorney, I provide some comments and some suggestions. I'll be following this up with the separate comments and suggestions to the city council as such. And I certainly have enjoyed working with the fellow members of the commission and enjoyed working with staff. I have brought up several times the issue of communications. I think it's very important from the top, and I'm going to stress the word top down, that communications be a priority. And I certainly have not liked the situation where I feel as though I've been blindsided on occasion. You may feel as though I blindsided you on occasion. I certainly have tried to do better as far as communicating and myself, but I think it's, like I said, I enjoyed my service and given my recommendation I felt are appropriate. Not everybody agrees with him, and that's good. That's the American way. And I certainly will be supportive of the commission and its members and of the city I dearly love and have been here more than 50 years and truly care a lot about. I won't give up some of my thoughts about stewardship. It's ingrained in me as a part of my religious upbringing. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but training that we need to be good stewards of our environment and protecting for our generation and future generations. And I feel as though local governments particularly have an important responsibility to be good stewards of their. And it's sad to see, well, I will only make $500,000 on this project versus $1 million on this project, where that seems to have gotten the priority as such. And certainly people need to be able, we need to be able to grow. We need to be able to develop. We need to have reasonable rules and regulations as such. But there needs to be a proper balance. And I think the city is a little out of balance at the motion, particularly watching some of the council meetings and what I'm hearing some people say. That concerns me greatly. And I guess, Member Richardson, your light is on.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
Well, I want you to continue serving. This is my agenda. I've accomplished what I wanted to try to accomplish, that is make recommendations. I go on from there.
I make a motion we reject his resignation.
You have no power. I rule you out of order.
Well, I tell you, Dwight, I've served on the P&Z before in council, and there's not been anyone that I like serving with better than you. And I've got to say, we have disagreed sometimes, and we've agreed a lot of times. I'm stunned. And
well, and let me just say again, I really enjoyed our relationship with one another here on the commission. And I mean that sincerely. So, Member Rice, yes, you're next. Go on.
Well, I just want to sort of echo Mr. Richardson that, you know, I know the city and I know the members of P&Z really appreciate the hard work and the leadership that you brought to P&Z. And, you know, Dwight, it's not just what you did at P&Z, but it's the 40 years that you were the city attorney and served with people like me and Joe as we were council members, and we always looked at you for good legal advice and keeping us out of trouble.
Yes, sir.
And so all those years have built an admiration for your service, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
We did get in trouble sometimes.
Yes. Member Spidell.
Your professionalism, your leadership has been outstanding, and your perspective on opinions and things have come before us, and some tough things have come in the last 18 months, I think. I think all of us are terribly disappointed that council is not honoring or at least respecting our council, which is all volunteer. It takes us away from our families and sometimes our work. You've made things a lot clearer to us. You've provided a professional perspective and a great legacy, your legacy for the city. And I'm shocked, and I know you're not here to make me happy, and you haven't made me happy tonight. So, but thank you just for getting to know you a little bit better and just having the privilege to sit next to you.
Well, we certainly can have lunch and sometime if you want to do that.
The sunshine law.
That's right. Okay, other members have reports. Yes, Mr. Rice.
Yeah, the Titusville Commission, TEC. The TEC did meet last week, and there was a couple things. One is we had a chairman that resigned about a month ago, and so we had to elect new officers, and Laura Lee is our new chairman of TEC, and I'm the vice chair. The things that were on the agenda, we discussed our priorities, and we sort of looked back at the Indian River and trying to understand what we have at our outfalls besides just what the BMAP say. And so we're going to have a guest speaker come in that is a lot more knowledgeable about the impurities coming in from our outfalls, so we can sort of understand, maybe come up with a recommendation to City Council of how we address heavy metals and everything else, and find out what we really do have coming out of our outfalls. So we had a good discussion about that. That won't be at our next meeting, but that presentation will probably be the meeting after that. Okay, staff is trying to schedule that along with Laura Lee, and I would encourage, if we do have that, maybe we can invite P&Z to that meeting as a joint meeting so they can hear the same thing that we're going to hear. So we talked about that, and then we Eddie and is it Rachel is new planner, and we talked about the sustainability plan a little bit, that the city is getting ready to kick off and do a sustainability plan. And so we discussed a little bit about metrics that could be in it, but really we need to put the plan together first and then figure out what the metrics are going to be to measure the success of the sustainability plan. So that's something that is moving forward. I think the city is hiring a consultant to help with do that. That's right. So we were sort of encouraged about having something like that come forward. And that's pretty much it, what we discussed.
Certainly sounds like an excellent future for the TEC and very important issues to address. And I'm sure the Planning and Zoning Commission, certainly I appreciate those words, because I think you're headed the right direction. And I'm surprised we don't have some of that information today, because we need to know what's going in the river. That's creating so many problems.
See, that was part of my struggle, is I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know what other impurities are going into the river, so I can't really address a plan or come up with recommendations to address a plan until we identify what the problem is. So that's why we're starting at the level that we want to start at, is identifying really what is the chemical makeup of the discharge water that's going into the Indian River from the Titusville proper.
Okay. All right. Any other member of the commission have a report? Member Richardson.
I do. A couple of things. We don't have an opening prayer or moment of silence, and so I'll respect that. But I do want you to keep in your thoughts and prayers the people of Afghanistan and our troops and the citizens that are trying to flee Afghanistan. Whatever your political belief is, just remember those people. And the second thing is, we have all recently experienced people that come down with COVID. And some people don't want to get the shots. And I did. I got the 2 shots. And I'm getting the 3rd one on Saturday at Publix. My 86-year-old mom got her 3rd shot today. And please consider taking the shots. It's in your own best interest, and it's in the community's best interest. And Dwight, I don't know what to say.
Sir, I just wanted to reinforce what you said about Afghanistan. 2 days ago, I have a nephew that was headed that direction. He wanted the joined the Marines, and guess where his first assignment is? There at the airport. That's where his first assignment is. So he wanted to have some action. Hopefully he doesn't have any action as such. Member Spidell.
I am continually interested in those properties that are delinquent and just need cleaning up. I thought council had made a motion to make a list of those and to try to get some effort to get some cleanup. I'm interested, I'd like some kind of report on what's happening at the Dream apartment complex, because it's a bad dream, it looks like. I don't know what's going on, but in my ignorance, people ask me what's going on, and I'd like to give them an accurate answer. Is that a rehab job? Is that a tear down? What's behind the black curtain?
Definitely not tear down.
Okay, so it's more improvement, or?
It's rehabilitating the interior of the building and redoing the outside, yes. The grounds.
I'm awfully interested in the south parking lot, which has been left delinquent.
That will be a parking lot. There was a site plan that was approved for that area.
There are lots of just areas in town where people are building these fences or keeping, putting up barriers. And is this positive progress?
It's movement. I know that this property has gone through many proposals that have not been completed in the past few years.
Is it not occupied at this point?
Can I answer the question?
Yes.
Because I saw the council meeting where the developer from Miami made a presentation to council to try to get this named an historical site. And they're trying to return it just like it was in the heyday of 1965. I think their attempts to do it are noteworthy, and under the situation of COVID, I think they've lacked the people to hire to get it done. But I applaud what they're doing. It's going to take a lot of time, though, because I remember we moved here in 1967, and we had to live in Palm House Apartments next to St. Teresa's Catholic Church. And the going place in Titusville was Imperial Towers.
My second interest is still the property that's right here to the north, where it's beside the Waffle House. It's the property south of the Waffle House. Used to be, what did that used to be? A car garage? Or?
It was an old garage, city garage,
okay.
Way back when.
Okay. It was also my understanding that two pieces of property now have for sale signs on them. I was under the impression that those were owned by the city. Oh, okay. You know what I'm talking about.
I believe I know what you're talking about.
North of the marijuana place. Okay. And also across the street. Oh, okay. Cure-All. Is that Cure-All or something? Curaleaf, yeah. North of Curaleaf.
I can't remember.
Directly across the street from Save-A-Lot.
I know, I understand.
Used to have a gazebo on it. And
it used to have a porker share, the canopy in front of it that was torn down. This was several years ago. Is that correct?
Used to
It
be
was a little
called
gazebo.
Pirtle's Garage.
Okay.
No. Okay, that too. Okay. Now I'm talking about vacant land that has two for sale signs on it. Yep. One is a parcel north of Curaleaf, right across the street from Save-A-Lot. Yes. Yes, and it had a gazebo on it. I thought it was owned by the city. It was maintained by the city for a long time. Now it has a commercial for sale sign on it.
Mr. Spidell, after the meeting, I can show you on a map. You can point which properties you're talking about. I'd be happy to give you a status on anything we can find out about those properties. Okay. And I'll do that collectively to the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Not seeing anything. The meeting is adjourned.